Welcome back to the internet. We're getting very close to Halloween now. So I actually just finished watching Final Destination, so the question for today is... Reddit, what is the most disturbing / unexplainable thing that has ever happened to you or someone you know? This one isn't super exciting, just weird. My grandma was always irrationally afraid of dogs. She liked them, but they made her nervous because they were too messy and loud and unpredictable. She would always tell us not to leave the door open on nice days. Close that door, a big black dog might walk in. She had this fear that one day she'd turn around and there'd be a big black Labrador slobbering on her floors. We always laughed at her oddly specific fear, and we knew everyone who lived nearby, and their dogs. The biggest, blackest dog within 1 mile of her house was a Yorkie, so her fear was unfounded. Anyway, years later, my grandma passed away. My dad and I had the sad task of clearing out her house. Things were a bit stuffy, so we left the door open to the yard and got to work. After a while, we both hear a strange noise and look up. It sounded like panting? We turn around and, I kid you not, there was a big, black Labrador sitting in the middle of the kitchen, just gazing up at us happily, drooling on Grandma's linoleum, just like she always said would happen. We lost it. Uncontrollable laughter, crying just a little, gave the dog scritches and escorted him back outside. My dad shut the door, looked upwards, and said, "Sorry, Ma, you were right. She just had to be proven right one last time. Love you, Grandma." Yeah, I know somebody else who's pretty terrified of dogs. My friend Ricky told me this story a few years ago. Rick was a very serious guy, conservative, mid-30s. He's not particularly religious, doesn't drink or do drugs, and doesn't believe in anything supernatural. He's into hunting, fishing, eating deer and wild animals, and that's about it. He's not the type to tell tales. That's why I believe him when he told me this. When Rick was 24, he was in a bathroom when he heard someone walking around his house. It was his brother, Mikey. Rick is really surprised to see him because his brother is at college across the country. "I just want to tell you everything is cool, man. I'm fine," Mikey says. Rick is like, "What is going on? What happened?" Mikey says, "I gotta go now, sorry. I don't have time to stay. Love ya," and then walks out the front door. Rick is confused and cannot speak. He said it felt like he was frozen, actually got shivers and could barely speak the entire time. He tried to follow him out the door. Mikey is gone. There's no sign of him. No car engines driving away, nothing. Rick immediately calls him. This was in the early 2000s days before everyone had phones. No answer. Rick calls his mom. She answers, and he tells her that Mikey has just shown up at his place, acting weird. She has no idea. Both of them try to contact Mikey for the rest of the day, to no avail. Rick drives around the neighborhood looking for him. About an hour later, Mom calls Rick. Mikey died in a car accident late the night before. The car wasn't found until morning. It was in a field way off the road. You know, with how many stories there are of people that say they've been contacted from those who have already died. Like, I can understand not wanting to believe in stuff like this, but with how many stories like this there are, it's hard to believe that they're all made up. My family go to a garden center near my town every winter, for pretty Christmas lights. Well, this one year, the day before we were supposed to go, I had a dream that on our way, the tire of the cars came off and we crashed hard. It was such a horrible, graphic dream. My mom's leg had been crushed, my dad's stuck, etc. Well, I told my mom in the morning, and she joked that she'd checked the wheels. She actually must have. She said the car felt weird, and the dream unnerved her. Lo and behold, the tire is loose and needs to be taken to a mechanic. Really weird experience, especially as I've never had a dream feel so real before. Well, go watch Final Destination, you can't cheat death, it'll come back for you. I was hanging out at a friend's house in their basement with my friends, his girlfriend, and mine. We were all playing an RPG. It was in the middle of the day. We hear the door open upstairs, footsteps on the floor, hear the cellar door open, and my friend's dad call downstairs. "Pete, you home?" My friend answers affirmatively, and then we hear, "Come upstairs a minute, I need your help." We all head upstairs. There's no one there. No car in the driveway, no one in the house at all but the four of us. All four of us heard the same thing. My friend's dad found the story funny, but unbelievable when he eventually came home later that day. Maybe his dad was driving home and just yelled really loud. I had a dream one night that I was given this baby to hold, and she was beautiful but looked like my sister. When I woke up, I cried uncontrollably about this baby and couldn't calm down for nearly 2 hours. Fast forward 6 months, and I had another few of these dreams, mostly the same, but now I knew she had a name, Maria. I told my parents these dreams, just lightheartedly, but their faces just shut down. A few hours later, they told me before I was born, they had a stillborn and called her Maria. They asked me what the baby looked like, and they kept crying. Never had the dream again. You know, with a lot of these stories, it seems like there's a lot of, sort of mental connection between family members. I posted this before, but my family and I lived in a tiny house when I was a kid. The front door opened to the living room and faced my bedroom door, which was probably 15 feet away. I was about 10 or 11 at the time. One night, I heard a pounding at the front door, like someone just banging. It was somewhat rhythmic and would start and stop suddenly. I thought maybe it was our dog, who had a utility room to himself. Sometimes he'd dig at the door to that room when he got bored, but he was sound asleep. I peered out the side window, but saw nothing on the front porch. I walked up to the door, and the banging sounded again. I put my hands on the door, but didn't feel any vibrations until I ran my hands to the lower right corner of the door. So maybe someone was kicking the door? The odd thing is that we had a screen door that was locked at night as well. I checked the windows again and saw no one outside. At this point, I'm completely creeped out, so I go back to my room and put a few things behind the door. The next morning, I asked my parents if they heard the noise. They said no. When we opened the door, there was a set of muddy footprints going up the sidewalk to the door and back again, a few times. And don't worry about it, it doesn't sound like there was anything supernatural. It's probably just someone breaking into your house. My dad grew up on a farm. He was playing in the hay loft where he wasn't supposed to be. At some point, he got too close to the edge and started falling backwards. That's when he felt a hand forcefully push him up and back to safety. He thought it was his dad, who was going to be mad at him, but he turned around and no one was there. It's not your time to go yet. A few years ago, my uncle woke up at around 2 in the morning because of the ringing of a telephone beside his bed. He picked it up, and it was his friend. His friend was asking how my uncle was and such. After a brief conversation, his friend said that he was peaceful where he is, things felt great, and that he's happy. My uncle was glad to hear that and said goodbye. As he put down the telephone, my uncle woke up and realized that he was dreaming. The next day, he heard news about his friend being killed by an intruder in his house at around 1 a.m. Maybe death is kind of like being arrested. You get to make your one phone call. Maybe you get to send one last message or go visit some people right before you disappear. My mom's whole side of the family was raised Catholic. All went to the same church in a small town in the south. I was there one summer as a kid with my mom. I'm maybe like 10 years old. My uncle's farmland backs right up to the church. Anyway, things haven't been going so well on the farm. Crops not growing right, healthy animals randomly dropping dead, chickens and small creatures showing up gutted even though he had a donkey to protect his cattle. Just weird stuff that's never happened before. So one day, the adults are acting super weird and cagey. You know how they act when something big is going down, but they don't want to scare the kids? Like that. My grandma, mom, uncle, aunt, some older cousins, and the priest, and another man from the church are all hanging out at my uncle's farm. And they basically kick me out of the house to go play. Naturally, being a very curious kid, I climb as high as I can in the nearest tree to the house, trying to eavesdrop. I hear a snippet of the conversation here and there, but can't figure out what they're up to. Everyone leaves the house, following the priest to the barn, stables, chicken coop, etc. This entire time, I'm watching from the tree. While they're all down at the stables, I hear the door to the house open, and a woman I've never seen before, maybe 30 years old with brown hair and a blue dress, casually walks out the door. She briefly looks up at me in the tree. I wave. She ignores me and walks off down the dirt road. Okay then. Once the adults are all done with whatever they're doing, we all gather in the dining room of my uncle's house to have some lemonade my aunt made, because it was such a warm day. I decide to pipe up and ask who the woman in the blue dress was, since I'd never seen her visit before. Every adult in the room freaks out. My aunt starts crying, the priest looks like he might barf, and I'm told the woman was just visiting. Okay, whatever. A decade later is when my uncle finally tells me that the woman I saw was an apparition that had started appearing to parishioners at the church and next door on my uncle's land. They assumed she was a lost spirit trying to pass on, but after she attacked the priest at his house, and farm animals started showing up dead, they decided she was some sort of demon, who appeared as a young woman to hide her true nature. The day I saw her from the tree, the adults had gotten permission from the Catholic Church to perform an exorcism on my uncle's land. It appears I witnessed her leaving. I wondered where she was going. I'm 26 years old today, and the story of Evelyn, as the parishioners started calling her, she'd been spotted inside the church, still gave me goosebumps. She was completely expressionless when she looked up at me in that tree. Didn't seem in a hurry to leave either. The moment she was gone, the crops started recovering, and we stopped finding dead and eviscerated livestock. I'm not religious, and I'm generally a pretty big skeptic, but I'll never be able to explain what I saw from that oak tree that day. Man, this actually sounds like it would be a movie. But then again, we have had a ton of exorcist movies in the last couple decades. So I developed schizophrenia, then had my first schizophrenic attack at work. I was working, it was like any other day, but out of the corner of my eye, I could just see things shift and distort. Usually I'd see bugs, but that was normal at that point. I was diagnosed with psychosis. But this time it was just different. Then, out of nowhere, I look at and directly see a hooded person burst in through the doors with a gun. I yelled and dropped to the floor, and everybody looked at me like I was the craziest person on planet Earth. I was so panicked I didn't care. I could still see the guy, and apparently I was rambling. They started asking what I took and what I was on. I came back and told them I thought I was drugged. I don't remember much after that. I kept getting this horrible, sinking, hopeless feeling of dread in the back of my mind. Like an atomic bomb was dropping right next to me, and there was nothing I could do. I still have days like that. That was 6 years ago. Man, why is it that all of these mental conditions like schizophrenia only bring out bad visions? Why can't there be some kind of schizophrenia where you see very happy and positive things just randomly show up that nobody else can see? I grew up in a military family and we moved around a lot. When I was 3, we moved to a military base in Cherry Point, North Carolina. Every single night for a year and a half we lived there, I would run to my parents' room at night screaming that there was a lady in my closet staring at me. When my parents came back to check, she was gone. Eventually they started locking their door because it was an every night thing and they got tired of it. Fast forward 18 years and I'm sitting with my mom just googling all the places we used to live for memory's sake. Turns out there's a legend on that base of a ghost of a woman. When they built the base, her grave was separated from her children, and now it's said that she roams the bedrooms of kids on the base looking for her own. I had a panic attack when I read it. The ghost's name is Kissy Sykes, if anyone is interested. Wow, so every night you saw this ghost, and then every night you continued to go back and sleep in that same room? Man, you must have had some pretty harsh parents. The strangest, most inexplicable thing that's ever happened to me happened only a few months ago. I was briefly working a job at a college bookstore, where one of my tasks was to call customers that had ordered books that were out of stock, and let them know that we had received their books. I'd already called a large number of customers that day, and was in the groove of it. I had the process figured out. You either called and got an answer, where you had a script to tell them about their book, or you got their answering machine and had a slightly different script to give. Simple enough. Until I called one number and got neither. Just silence. It threw me off a little, and I just hung up after a few seconds. I called them back. This time, I heard what sounded like someone picking up and quietly listening. But, for some reason, I held my tongue and just listened too. I could hear sounds, like people faintly talking in the background. Then, I heard a quiet, "Hey, how can I help you today?" A man responded something along the lines of, "I need to pick up my book." I was confused for a split second, until my coworker, standing near me behind our desk, suddenly says, "Hey, how can I help you today?" She's speaking to a customer, a man, who tells her, "I need to pick up my book." Suddenly I got goosebumps. I listened for a few moments more. On the line, I hear their conversation, about a second before it happens. I hang up, walk out from behind the desk, and say to my coworkers, "I'm going on my break." My break consisted largely of me sitting at a table outside, and silently wondering what had happened. I didn't do phone calls for the rest of the day. It never told any of my coworkers. I mean, I've heard of phone conversations that have a couple second delay from reality, but never so much of reality having a delay from a phone call. When I was 19, I was walking home from the library, and a cop pulled up to the curb, asking to see my ID. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I showed it to him. After a moment of verifying that I was who my ID claimed I was, he apologized and handed me a printout of a missing teen, a couple years younger than me. She could have been my identical twin. I told him that I didn't blame him for thinking I was her. I don't remember her name. I was too shaken up by the picture, but I still wonder what she was doing and if she's okay. It was nearly 20 years ago. Man, it's gotta suck for all those people who have sort of a doppelganger out there. Especially when it's somebody who's wanted or missing, or, someone just very popular. My son was playing with some blocks at his nan's house one day when he was 3. All of a sudden he looks up and proceeds to tell his nan and aunt that, "One day when I was 17, I was bad and took a motorbike. The police chased me, so I went around a truck, but I crashed into a tree and died." Then he turned back around and continued playing with his blocks like it was no big deal. Wow, and you didn't even finish off the story by saying that some 17-year-old just died in a motorcycle accident? When I was in elementary, I went to school ridiculously early for swim practice. Turns out it was canceled, and I only found out when I got there. That meant that I had the whole school to myself. I waited near the school gate, and soon enough my homeroom teacher arrived. I greeted her, saying, "Hi, Mrs. Grace." Here's where it gets weird. She ignored me and walked past me. Confused, I looked towards the gate, then back at where she was walking. Except she wasn't there. I was a bit frightened at that point, so I went to wait outside my locked classroom, which happens to be next to the restrooms. I sat down on the floor. A few minutes later, I heard the eeriest, creepiest laugh coming from the restroom. It was really high-pitched, almost witch-like. It made my hair stand on end. I was so scared I ran back towards the school gate. A few minutes later, my homeroom teacher, the one I had just seen earlier, who ignored me and then vanished into thin air, passed through the gate. She saw me and greeted me. I was too freaked out to reply. Until now, I have no idea what on earth happened. It's the only paranormal experience I haven't been able to explain to this day. I gotta say, I like the stories like this better where they don't end in somebody dying. Once I adopted a street kitten. He was bothering me while I painted, so I put him in my room. As soon as I closed the door, I heard a bang on the other side of the house. I went to investigate and found my kitten. This was about 30 feet away. It really freaked me out, and I have no rational explanation. Well, as anybody with a cat can tell you,
cats do not abide by the laws of nature.
You know, even though I've been doing these stories and working at a Halloween place, I still feel like Halloween is really just creeping up on me. And I haven't really watched very many scary movies, so that's probably what I'm going to be doing for the next few days. So thanks to everybody for watching.